In today's brief video, I want to take a moment and tell you guys about the most common ages where I see people call our offices to quit smoking weed, or where people start to consider that weed might be a problem in their life. If you're new to the channel, my name's Dr. Frank. I personally struggled with THC addiction for about 9 years, and I'm the founder of AddictionMindset Recovery Coaching, which are programs dedicated to helping people quit nicotine, THC, energy drinks, and adult media content, all things that I once struggled with. So right off the bat, I think you are going to have a small group of people who wind up quitting at a very young age. So they started smoking weed at a young age, and they wind up quitting by the end of high school, somewhere in their early teen years. And usually the people that fall into this category tend to have faced some type of crisis very early on, and it's usually a health-related crisis. So in the case of weed, more often than not, we'll see people calling our offices in the teenage years facing conditions like Cannabinoid Hyperemesis Syndrome, where they're becoming very sick from smoking weed. Maybe they were drinking a lot of alcohol and they had a borderline overdose that landed them in the hospital, and now they're considering giving up drinking at the age of 16, 17 years old. Usually there's some type of crisis involved when we see someone quit that young. And the reason for that is because when you are that young, usually you're not really suffering the health consequences, you're not suffering the financial consequences, you don't have a lot of responsibilities at that point in your life, and generally speaking, your body recovers quickly and you feel good. Alcohol, weed, nicotine, those things don't make you feel bad when you're that young. They truly do just kind of make you feel good. So it's kind of rare that we see that. The only other time I see someone quitting at that age is when their parents are forcing them to quit. Maybe they got caught with weed, they got caught vaping, and now their parents are contacting our offices for help. Now, I started, my journey with addiction probably around the age of 16, 17 with cigarettes, and then it developed into everything else, and I quit right around the age of 28, which we'll talk about. The next point where I see people quit is usually somewhere between the ages of 25 and 30. And for a lot of people, this is going to be right around that time where you're getting out of college, you've had your fun, but you're starting to feel the side effects of alcohol a little bit now. You're starting to feel the side effects of weed a little bit now. And this is usually that point where you're facing bigger decisions. You're starting your career, you're out of school, your life is kind of getting on track, but it's not on track yet. And I think 25 to 30 is a crucial moment, and I know a lot of my viewer demographic is in the age range of 25 to 30 because this is that time where you're probably starting to make some money. This is that time where you're probably starting to get involved in more serious relationships, and this is really an opportunity that you get to grow up, right? And this is where I had to make a decision. Am I going to keep smoking? Am I going to push through this? Am I going to continue to live in this kind of fantasy world that I created for myself? Or am I going to, quote unquote, and I don't like using this term, but grow up and start to pursue relationships seriously, start to pursue my career seriously? And it's also at this point where you're probably starting to feel the health consequences. You're starting to feel the hangovers. You're starting to feel the grogginess from weed. You're starting to feel the burnout from doing substances, somewhere usually around 25 to 30, especially if you started young. You've gotten through the honeymoon phase, and now you're onto that side of things where it's becoming a problem, or where you could see it becoming a problem if you were to continue to use these substances. And I think this is a crucial point in time to quit. And I'll tell you why I believe that, because if people don't quit somewhere between 25 and 30, usually the next point of wanting to quit is somewhere around the age of 40. And I think this becomes a little more difficult, still absolutely doable, but a little more challenging because by the age of 40, you're probably just getting settled comfortably in your career. At this point, you've probably made some good money. You've been working. You might have a family. You might have kids, right? So by the age of 40, a lot of people have accomplished something. Some people more than others, some people less than others, but they got the new house, they got the wife or the husband, they got the family, and they accomplished all these things in light of having an addiction to cannabis. And I think this becomes more complicated to quit because now this individual sits back and says, well, I've gotten this far with weed, so maybe weed really is helping me. Maybe weed really has been the answer. But then at the same time, they got this other voice in their head saying, hey, you should quit. You want to quit. You should quit. You should stop smoking. It's time to stop. And at 40, if you weren't feeling the health consequences somewhere between the age of 25 and 30, I think you're certainly starting to feel it around the age of 40. And this is where you're really having to face those other responsibilities for a lot of people, not everyone, but where you have the responsibility of children, you have the financial responsibility of the house, you have new career goals, you have new business goals, you have more things in life that you want to achieve, either for yourself or to leave behind for those that you care most about when the day comes that you eventually pass away. And when we hit the age of 40, we're not at like the halfway point in life, but we're getting closer to that point in life where time is becoming a lot more valuable. Right now we don't have 30. Now we don't have another 60 years guaranteed to achieve what we need to achieve. So 40 is a very common breaking point for people with addiction, and it usually revolves around quitting for family, quitting for career goals, quitting just because what this person does in their 40s is going to impact how they live in their 50s and their 60s. And they know what it's like to live with weed, and now they kind of want to retire it. They kind of want to see what the next several years have to bring. If people don't quit around the age of 40, the next breaking point that I typically see is somewhere between the age of 60 and 63 years old. So you have to ask yourself, if you're in your 40s watching this, do you got another 20 years in you? Is that what you want to do? Do you want to commit to another 20 years potentially of this lifestyle if you're struggling with marijuana addiction? Can you afford to commit to another 20 years? Can your family afford to have you commit to another 20 years? Those are the questions you got to ask yourself, because that's often what I see. At the age of 60, it's a little different. It's still totally worth quitting and totally worth getting the ball rolling with things, but it becomes a little more difficult. By the age of 60, we're pretty ingrained in our habits, we're pretty ingrained in our patterns, and change is more difficult. At this point, you've now accomplished a lot of things in life that you've set out to accomplish, and now you're on the retirement end of things. You're on the winding down end of things. Not for everyone. Some people are just rolling in their careers when they're 60. I hope to be doing that. But for most, we're talking about generally speaking. And at 60, it's harder to make a change. You've been doing something now for 40 years. You've been behaving a certain type of way. It's hard to change that behavior. Not impossible, but it's harder. And at 60, if the health consequences have set in, now we're kind of trying to play catch up. And it's hard to catch up on lost time. It's hard to catch up on lost health. It's doable. It's not impossible, but it's a bit more of an uphill challenge. And guys, listen, we have people call our offices every week who are 60, 65 years old, who are making tremendous changes and gaining back tremendous opportunity in life by quitting cannabis. I guess what I'm saying is, if you're 40 though, or you're 30 though, let's try and not push it out to till you're 60, because it's just looks a little different. At 60, usually the health consequences are setting in, and now we're trying to reverse those, or we're trying to maintain those to not let things deteriorate further. So, I think you got to start to ask yourself, if you're in your 30s, how do you want to live when you're in your 40s and 50s? If you're in your 40s, how do you want to live when you're in your 60s? If you're in your 60s, how do you want to live when you're in your 80s? And you got to ask yourself, do you really want to sign up for another 10 years, 20 years, 30 years of addiction? Because the actions you take today, the choices you take today, are going to determine how you live tomorrow. They're going to determine how your future looks. And that's really what quitting is all about. And I tell people this all the time. It's not about tomorrow, it's about the next 10 years, it's about the next 20 years. And that's where we want your mindset to be focused on. If you are watching this and you need help, check the video description or check out the pinned comment below. We have links for free resources, and if those don't interest you, just follow me right into the next video. I'll see you guys there.